Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another in the series of continuing legal education programs that are brought by the ADR Skills program of New York Law School. My name is Peter Phillips, and I serve as the director of the program here at New York Law School. And we are delighted to welcome Nicolas Fournier from London. And I'm very grateful to all of you who managed to interrupt your otherwise highly profitable workday in order to take the opportunity to meet Nicolas and get the benefit of his remarks. Um, I want to remind those of you who may be unaccustomed to joining us that Nicolas is going to want to hear from everyone in terms of any questions and so on, but you will see that everyone is muted at the outset. There are enough people on that we have found it difficult to field questions in real time. So if you have comments or questions, I hope that you will put them in the chat field. The chat button is there on the bottom of your screen. I will monitor that during the presentation. And when Nicolas is finished, I'm going to be posing some of those questions or comments to him on your behalf. The only other thing I want to remind you is that in its wisdom, the Court of Appeals of the State of New York has required that those of us who seek CLE credit for online educational programs need to evidence their participation in the program throughout the program. So at about, I don't know, 25 past the hour, I'm going to sneak in and interrupt Nicolas for just a moment and give everyone a code word. Rose has sent everyone a link to a form, and after the two code words are given, one at about half past and one at the end of the program, we will ask you to bring that link up, fill in the two slots for the two code words, and press submit, and you'll be getting your CLE credit. All right, well, I think that does it for the housekeeping. I met Nicolas at a meeting of the World Mediation Forum that is convened by the UIA, the Union Internationale des Avocats, in London about this time last year. And it was a panel of speakers on dispute resolution in China, which was not an uncommon topic. But what was uncommon was Nicholas's presentation, because he, although he is an accomplished and professional full-time mediator now, the story that he told in London was before that began, when he was an entrepreneur starting a business at the People's Republic of China. And it was the only time that I have ever heard a discussion of dispute resolution in China from someone who knew what mediation was, but whose first experience was entrepreneurial and commercial rather than legal or involved in dispute resolution. And I thought, this guy, I really want this guy's perspective and experience to be shared in a larger audience. And I'm very, very pleased, therefore, to welcome Nicolas Fournier. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for these very kind words. I hope I'm not going to disappoint anyone after this apology. Right, I'm putting some slides which will be a good support for me. And I'm going to first give you a warning at the very beginning of this session together. I hope this session will be worth the lunch that you might not have time to take. But you have to understand that even though I'm very honored to be invited to speak in front of attorneys and students and maybe professors, but myself, I'm definitely not an academic. I'm not an expert. And I wouldn't dare lecturing anyone on China. And I could say that I've seen that we have a few Chinese people attending here, and uh, and so I have to be very much careful about what I'm going to say because they could say, "Well, this guy has understood nothing about China." But you have to understand something is that there was a joke at the time when I was in China. I spent 10 years of my life living in China and based in Shanghai, but traveling quite a bit all around China. And there was a story that when a Western guy goes to China for a week, usually after that, he writes a book about China because, well, he has understood a lot of things during this week. But then, if this same person comes back and spend a month in China, then he will not dare writing a book. He will rather write an article in a magazine, but nothing more. And the thing is, if you stay above a year, longer than a year or 5 or 10 years, well, then you don't say anything about China because you feel that you are not entitled to. You feel that the more you have scraped the surface, the more you have discovered a depth that you will never be able to fathom, never be able to fully understand as a foreigner, which was totally my case because I was born in France. I live now in London, but I have nothing in my background pushing me or giving me some head start about China, about Mandarin, or about Chinese culture. So, what I'm going to talk to you about is an understanding of China, but again, not an academic one. Someone who has studied Chinese or Mandarin, more specifically Guoyu, during many, many years. And I've been living and working in China as a businessman. I went there to start a subsidiary of a big multinational building materials company, and I stayed there for 10 years. Now, one of the things that you learn about China is this little proverb that I've put here, which says basically that studying is like rowing against the current on a stream, say. If you're not moving forward, you are moving backward. And that's exactly what happens when you stop practicing your Chinese, you stop learning about Chinese or about China, you get backward. You get backward. And now I've been away from China for 20 years. So frankly, I don't know whether I can tell you anything of interest because I've gone so far backward that really I don't understand much about China today. Good news is that doesn't change because when I left after 10 years, the more I had dug into this culture, the more I had put my children in Chinese schools so that they would be educated in Chinese schools and all that, the more I understood that I would never understand. But despite that, what I can do is share with you some of my takeaways because I had to develop a business in China from scratch. I had to build a factory, have to set up a commercial network. I had to register a company, so I had to do everything that needs to be done to become an entrepreneur in China. And I learned a lot, and a lot through my mistakes, through my misunderstandings. But probably it helped me to gather some wisdom, some. Right. So if I tell you that now I've totally given up being in a corporate world as a senior executive, and now my life is just about mediating commercial disputes or civil and commercial disputes, that I spend my time getting into the middle of a conflict, like probably a lot of you around this table today. Uh, well, I'd like to share with you some of the things that I've learned about doing business, about getting into conflicts or negotiations or power struggle, and what I've learned out of it. Right. So the first thing, in my view, is that it's all about relationships. So those of you who have a bit of experience of China will know that the key word is guanxi, which I've put here. It's about relationship, and it's people used to say that Guanxi is everything in China, and to some extent it is true because this is what cements, what pulls together society, and if people behave well, if they play the game within some rules, then you can reach harmony. And this harmony is something which traditionally in the centuries and centuries that China has developed its culture, actually several thousand years, this is something very important. And so once you understand the importance of relationship, you say, well, okay, it's about society, but if you do business, it's all about the interaction that you will have with your business partners, with your clients, with your suppliers. And how does that work, these relationships? And worse, if things start going wrong, the relationship deteriorates, what to do about it? Because if you don't do anything, your business is going to be potentially harmed. So I take the opportunity to advertise for the profession of being a commercial mediator. Well, for me, a commercial mediator is essentially a doctor, a healer of sick relationships. And that's what I'm going to try to explain to you, how, as a mediator today, I use some of the things I understood in China to maybe not make a diagnosis, because honestly, I'm not necessarily a good doctor, but certainly to try to help to heal the relationship between the people. Now, basic story, I was trained as a scientist, not a lawyer, as you understood. So I like to have clear axes and square things. So here you have one axis, the horizontal one, which is around trust. And on the left, you have good trust. And on the right, you have trust which has been lost or distrust. Or on the other axis, you have communication. Communication, which at the bottom is good, and at the top, well, there is no more communication. And normally, a good relationship, you trust each other and you communicate. But sometimes, well, you have different views, and actually, it's normal. It's a good thing to have diverse views or differing views from your partner or whoever you are with. But potentially this turns into a dispute, and people start being a bit less open-minded to understanding what is or what right there might be in what the other party is saying. And the more you go, gradually you move, the trust starts being seriously eroded, and you find it more and more difficult to talk to the other party. And that's where really you start getting in trouble, because if there is no more communication and no more trust, you get into a crisis. So this character here is the character that is mostly used, but there are many ways to say crisis in Chinese. This one is the most commonly known because it may mean either a crisis or also an opportunity. So people who talk about China, I love to say that every crisis is an opportunity. All right, yeah, fine. But how can we go a bit further or a bit deeper than that? There is another word which I like very much, which is feng po, and which is literally the wind and the waves. When you're in a crisis, it's like a storm. If you have ever experienced to be on a ship in the middle of a storm where the wind is terrible and the waves are rocking your boat and all that, this is what a real nice crisis is about. And you don't know your whereabouts, you don't know how long it's going to last, you have no clue whether you're going to survive it or not. Right. And so if you are in this crisis, well, the normal way to go ahead is to refer the problem in your relationship to a third party, whether a judge or an arbitrator, and the judge will be the one ruling over the matter. He will be the one making a decision who is right, who is wrong. Unfortunately, often nobody is right and nobody is wrong. And so it will be statistics, a percentage of, yeah, okay, and he will rule according to his understanding of what the law says about the dispute, but totally neglecting whatever other dimensions to the conflict there might be or to the dispute there might be. So, what to do when the relationship is ill? Well, first thing, you call a mediator, you call a doctor, a healer. And I like to see, it's a bit oversimplifying, I'm sure you will find that, but to say that there are four main dimensions to conflict. The first two ones, I just mentioned them, communication and trust. And it's because you have a problem on these two axes that basically you've come to a conflict zone. I'd like to say something about the trust here because there are several ways to talk about trust, but I've put here two dimensions of trust, which apply not only in China, obviously, it's in any kind of relationship with someone. But one is the idea of someone trustworthy, someone honest, someone who, when he says something, you can believe that it is right, that he will act accordingly. So this is quite important. And there is the other one, which is very dear to me, cacao. Sorry, wrong tones. The first means that you can, and the second means you can lean upon or rely upon. And this cacao, the dependable bit, the reliable part of a relationship, can you rely on your trusted friend? Well, normally, yes. And I have a story here for you, a story which I went through. I mean, when I arrived in China in 95, my task given by my company was to set up a building materials industry or manufacturing a factory, basically, to produce plasterboard or gypsum wall, as you call it in the US. And one key element was to be able to bring raw material, which was very heavy, ponderous gypsum, literally, rocks. And for that, we needed to have an access by water so that the water transport would give to our business model a relatively good cost basis and good economics, basically, to be one day profitable. So we definitely needed to have access to the Huangpu River, which is the river that flows across Shanghai. And for that, we needed to be able to secure a jetty on which the boats loaded with rocks could moor and basically unload the raw material for us to make our gypsum walls. But the jetty was owned by a Shanghai shipping company, which at the time was a state-owned enterprise. And for us, it was vital to secure this. And for them, they considered this jetty as being a key asset, a core asset for them. So they were not ready at all to give away control over this jetty. And because of administrative reasons, we had to be able to to agree if we wanted to set up the company and not be charged with crazy VAT and this sort of thing. So we had to strike a deal before the 31st of March 1996. And literally 3 days before, we got into a room and we started to negotiate. And so I was the chief negotiator for my international corporation, and the general manager of Shanghai Shipping Company was a sailor, basically, and he was a decision maker. And we got into a room, and we knew that we had to get out of the room only with a deal signed. So it started on a Sunday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning. And in the evening, we were still working on it, negotiating, and we had lawyers typing the clauses of the JV agreement. And it got deep in the evening and in the night. And at 3 o'clock, we were still there. And at 5 o'clock, we were still negotiating. And at 8 o'clock, my counterpart was as exhausted as I was to have negotiating for 24 consecutive hours. We were completely on our knees, and yet we were still negotiating. And eventually we find a deal, we sign, we get the license to set up our business, and everything is okay, and we do our joint venture, and in the end it has been quite successful. We made good money and all that. It's only 5 or 6 years later that the guy talked to me about this session, and I said to him, look, when we negotiated, you and I, it was during a dinner at the end of a board meeting, because he was a director on our board, obviously. And I told him, wow, what a story it has been to negotiate like we did, like that. That was really tough. And the guy said, no, well, that was a really good time, and I really enjoyed it. Really? Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Because for me, it was the only way to know how reliable you were. And the word that he used at that time was cacao. Could he, as a partner, because that's what we were negotiating, the joint venture, could he, as a partner, trust me, who was to become the general manager of the newly formed joint venture? Could he trust me? And how do you know if someone is trustworthy? Well, you try him. And that's exactly what happened. In fact, the whole story for him was a way to test and try how reliable I was, whether after a sleepless night, I was still on my 2 legs, still able to fight with him. But we fought, it was more like a ballet, a choreography. And in the end, it's because the two of us, we managed to find a deal and to sign it, that he trusted me. And that's where it's quite interesting. That's where the relationship bit, the trustworthiness and the reliability of someone in China is an essential part of a business partnership. And to some extent, I could even say that it is more important than the contract that you sign. So I will come back on that, particularly if there are questions, but this is a very important thing that, in my view, in my experience, even though the law has become more and more important and prominent in China, I think the relationship between business partners remains essential, the first key element. All right, let's move to
And
the other.
if I may, Nicholas, before we
Yeah,
go on, let me give the first code word, which is
go ahead.
people. P-O, no, P-E-O-P-L-E, people. All right. Go ahead, Nicholas.
Thank you, Peter. Right. Third dimension, which is essential in any sort of conflict resolution, what is the power balance? And this is particularly important. I mean, that has always been a key element in China, in my view. But in any negotiation where you have to deal with communication issues. You have to wonder whether the other guy is trustworthy or not. But another question is, okay, where do I stand in the power balance? Does he have real power over me, or do I have over him? What are the elements which can play in all that? And obviously, any conflict resolution will have to take that into account. So we might do an hour just on the question of power balance in China, particularly now that on the worldwide scene, the soft power of China, the very clever, well, I was going to say subtle, it's not so subtle, but the way China has gradually grown its soft power through the new Silk Road and all these sort of things it's very interesting. But that's not the purpose of today. I mean, yet in any commercial dispute, the question of what is the nuisance power of the other, what is the power that I have to impose something, will be a key element to define what could be done to restore or the sick relationship. But now I'm going to deep dive a bit more on the fourth dimension, which for me is the most fascinating one, the most interesting one, the question of face. Now, face, Mianze, this is something that we all know. I mean, even in our Western world, I'm talking here to the Westerners. I mean, apologies for the Chinese around this webinar. But we all talk about in our normal language every day. I didn't want to lose face, so this is part of the human nature, this question of faith. But it so happens, in my understanding, that in China, it has been something essential in the building of society. So I'm not going to make a lecture on Confucius and the Confucianism and the Taoism, but obviously there is a strong link here, and that could be another conference. So what can we say about faith? There again, there are several dimensions to it. Again, I'm not lecturing here. I'm just sharing with you guys what is my understanding of what faith is about. It starts with yourself. How do you consider yourself? What is the self-consideration, the self-esteem that you have? This is quite important. And in our Western world, especially when centuries ago in the Middle Ages or later on, when you had knights and this sort of thing, the notion of honor was very important. I think it still is today, but we talk much less about it than we used to several centuries ago. But what is honor but in a way a mix of the image that you have of yourself and of the image or of the status or the importance and whatever you say to the others. And so here you have several translation of faith or several dimensions, but dignity, reputation, this is really what makes faith as something very important, both for the way you consider yourself, but also the way you are perceived and positioned in the society. And you have to understand how important it is because in a way, in China, where you belong, there used to be some caste, but where you belong, the group, the company you belong to, the community you belong to is something very important. And the face is where your position is in this group. And it's an interesting balance in China between a very strong individualism of people who when I was in China, who were taking their bike, and they were one among the million people riding their bikes in Shanghai to go to their Tanwei, to their the place where they were working, and 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 you could see that as a mass, as a group, indistinct. You had a flow, a wave of bicycle riders, much less so now because you have all sort of motors and everything. But it was quite funny. And it was quite interesting to have one guy saying, well, I'm like an ant. And when I'm in the crowd, in the mob, I'm like an ant. I'm not an individual. I only belong to this, and I go with the flow. And I shut my ears and I shut my eyes. But when I get out of it, I become a man again, and with my individuality and with my own character. I'm not an ant anymore. I'm a unique human being. And this balance between how you position yourself as an individual against the group, well, in China, normally the group precedes, has more importance, and people would be expected to abide by a number of rules. So, so the face is quite important in the way you position yourself. And the worst that can happen is that you lose face. So this is really bad because it's well, if we were in medieval times in Europe, you would say, well, the knight has been dishonored and he cannot be a knight anymore. I mean, if you lose face in China, it hurts both your self-esteem, but also your positioning, your status, and this is very, very serious. And it's not good because, in a way, if someone loses face, it undermines the position that this person had, and it weakens the group, it weakens the community, and it's a bad thing if someone loses face. So what can we do to make sure that we don't make someone lose face? So the opposite would be, well, you can gain face or give face to someone. Now, that doesn't mean flatter, although sometimes you might have something like that, and there is uh, there is an expression in China which is pai ma pi, which is literally to tap on the back of the horse, and that refers to if a mandarin or someone important was riding a horse and you wanted to be very respectful and everything, you would tap the back of the horse and gently so that you pay respect to that. Well, this is a bit too much, but there are many ways in building the relationship with someone, or in the way to resolve the conflict, to try to work, what could I do to give this person face? Because then it doesn't mean he has lost face, but it's like a credit in the bank. I mean, the more face you give to someone, the richer he is in a way. And whatever you do in the end, you should try to make sure that you save face. And that's so funny when I work on conflict resolution in Europe. Uh, People won't talk about that, but it would be an underlying concept. You have, if you want to resolve a conflict or to help the parties to resolve the conflict, you have to understand that it will not be possible for someone to agree to a settlement unless, of course, the power balance forces the person to do so. But assuming that there is no coercion, which is too strong, no one will accept to sign a deal and to settle if it makes him lose face. So any solution has to respect the face of the others, and possibly even if there was a mistake, or if there was, yeah, you have to find a way around so that the person is not nailed to the cross, but rather he keeps his face, or his face is saved. And now I'm moving forward, and I'm going to come soon to an end. One of the things that fascinated me in China was the concept of Chengyu. So the Chengyu are normally four characters who come from the 1,000 years of Chinese civilization. And the Chengyu is, for me, it's really one of the core of the Chinese culture because it captures in four characters something which is sometimes very long to explain. It refers often to an event in which happened 3,000 years ago, and that only very learned people, very cultivated people would know about. But this captures the essence of the story and says something of a certain wisdom. And so there are a few of them which give some ideas about how you can work on finding a solution and a face-saving solution. Well, let's start with the negative bit. You don't manage, and literally this one means that your face goes to the rock bottom. I mean, and hits the rock usually. So you are thoroughly discredited. You have lost face. It's a catastrophe. And mind you, this is something that sometimes happens, particularly if someone overplays the power that is in his hands. And I'm not going to make any reference to the political scene in some countries in the world. I mean, but definitely whenever something is imposed totally by a strong party to a weak party, I'm not sure it gives good idea, good prospective about how long this is going to last. A bit better in the process is, well, you have someone with superior strength. Okay, so you know that you really go to battle, if you really go to arbitration, and you will lose. So that's part of the game. You know, well, if you have good lawyers, good attorneys, you should know what your risks are, and the mediator would help you to assess this risk. And there you realize that your case is not so good and that the judge might really rule against you. And then why not try to settle before? And obviously, you have to do it on terms which are not as good as if the power balance was in your favor. But yet, it's a wise thing to do to give way ahead of being crushed. Now, even better in my scale, my personal scale, well, okay, how about we try to find common ground, and obviously we have our differences. We have realized through the first part of the conflict resolution or the mediation, we have realized that yes, we disagree. And in a way, we agree that the other may be right in disagreeing with me. So we agree to disagree. Why not? So let's agree to differ, and yet let's find the common ground or the founding stones or the cornerstones on which we can build something which will respect our differences, our diversity, our difference of opinions, and yet resolve the conflict. And at the scale, well, a good mediator will help each party to have deeply expressed its interest. Not necessarily, as you all know, the posturing that happens when you start or when you flex your muscles with just to show the others that you really are good gorilla thumping your chest. But deep down, what is behind all this? What is really the deep interest that you have, and which you may not be ready to give up on, but you could give up on your posturing and whatever you ask at the beginning. And so if you manage to bring on the table what the real interest of everyone is, well, that's when you can and find a solution, a collective using the collective intelligence, the collective creativity. Well, that's the beauty of a nice settlement deal. But as you see, these four Chengyus, I don't know how long they go back in the Chinese history, but you know, we've not invented much ourselves. They do. All right. And so if you do all that, well, remember the picture of the conflict which has escalated. And yes, there was an arbitrator who was about to put a solution on the table and all that. Well, you can bypass that basically through a mediation and write a settlement agreement. And remember the two scales, and you're back to communication and trust. Now, you've converted what used to be the wind and wave, the bad crisis, the storm, into something where the clouds scatter and the wind flows, and gradually the crisis settles down. This is another Chengyu. So as a conclusion, and then I think we're right on time. A couple of minutes to give my key takeaways, and then I'll be happy to discuss with you whatever you would like. But as a conclusion, first, and that applies not only to China, obviously, healing relationship is a difficult thing. But we have quite a bit to learn from China because of this long history that the Chinese culture and its way to seek social harmony. I think they have developed how could I say, a wealth of experience which can be useful for us Westerners who, as someone said to me one day, well, there are things that we cannot understand as Westerners because we only have a couple of thousand years of history, while if you're Chinese, you can have inherited 5,000 years of culture and civilization. So maybe that puts us as a disadvantage as non-Chinese people. If crisis is managed and overcome positively, well, it can, and if you manage to respect the differences and identify the interests, well, you can come to creative ideas and really create value. And obviously, if it's an ongoing relationship, which at some stage went into a stormy period, well, if you've managed to sail across the storm together and find a solution, imagine how stronger your relationship will be as partners. Now, we have, like always, trust and communication as the two key pillars. There is the balance of power, which is part of the game, part of the equation, which has to be brought into the assessment of the situation. And you have faith. And if you are able to overcome the differences and give face to the opponent, normally it puts you in a good position, especially if it's symmetrical. So what can we learn as Westerners, stupid young Quetzer? What can we learn from Chinese long history and sophisticated civilization? Well, this is a question that I'm certainly not able to fully answer, but I try to give you some hints of what I took away from my 10 years in China.
That really is terrific, Nicholas. Thank you very, very much. You have exceeded even my expectations, and you see in the chat field some participants lauding your perspective. I wanted to ask for myself, if I may, if I could just delve a little bit farther into the question of face. many American negotiators are taught to make sure that there is an exit ramp, make sure that the counterparty has a way out of it. Sometimes people say, make sure that you don't paint them in a corner, that they have a way out. The concept of giving face seems to be one step farther than that. And I wonder if a Western negotiator dealing with a Western counterparty can use that as a tool, or do you think it's something that only someone from an Asian background could receive?
Uh, I think it's a very valid point you're making here, Peter. I'd say that referring to what I just said about the sophistication, the refinement of Chinese culture, and how they have worked over thousands of years in their relationship, I think they're giving us a direction where to go. And yes, it's one thing not to corner someone or to force something into someone. True. But if you can go one step further and through some of these things that I've just mentioned to give face to the person, I think it's not rocket science. It's being a bit more sophisticated than being blunt and trying to resolve a conflict just by coercing someone or exercising your strength. So it's more refined. I think any Western person, non-Chinese, can work, but it's a long journey, and but I think we can all learn from that, and I hope I'm still learning about it.
Yeah, I was on a I was on a panel in a mediation summit that took place in Chongqing. And a friend of mine, Danny McFadden, was one of the speakers. And he started speaking in Mandarin for about a minute and got a big laugh, and then proceeded to give his address in English. And I said to him afterwards, how did you get the laugh? And he said, well, I was going to tell a joke, but I realized a lot of people in the audience had heard me tell the joke before in other mediation summits. So I asked them, please, when I get to the end of the joke, would you please give me some face?
Which they did, right?
Which they did. And I learned a new concept, as I always do every time
Yeah.
I visit China. Well, it's getting on to 12:50, and everyone needs to get back to work. The last code word for everyone is republic. Republic. Oh, Athena just asks very quickly before we sign off about how mediation is actually practiced in China. Can you, in fact, identify Tao or Confucian uh, roots or elements in the practice itself?
Uh, Look, right now I might not be the right person to say how things are being done today in People's Republic of China, because I live in London, and that's quite far away. So what I think is that Taoism and Confucianism, sorry, has is is oozing everywhere in China, and it's underlying everything. Whether it is officially linked, some patterns or some elements are there officially, or can they be traced back? Maybe it's not done consciously, but I think it has shaped the Confucianism, has shaped the society of China in such a way that I cannot imagine that it is not a strong element at play during conflict resolution through mediation.
To me, one of the great ironies, Nicholas, about the Communist Party in China is that you have an underlying Marxist view of the world that conflict and dialectic is the way of, of social progress. And yet it's in a country with thousands and thousands of years of instruction on harmony and avoiding conflict. So there you have it.
Yeah,
Nicolas Fournier, thank you very, very, very much for your kindness.
my
Thank you,
pleasure and my
everyone.
honor.
Remember, the last code word is Republic. And we hope to see you all next month. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.